You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. As always, we're back with another of the season preview podcasts. Today's season preview podcast, we're going to be looking at a team that, look, for many NBA fans, might not be the most exciting team to watch this season, but as we all know, every team has to put up stats. Every team scores points. Every team gets rebounds. And this is a team with a ton of turnover. There's lots of opportunities for numbers to be put up. And I am, of course, talking about the Brooklyn Nets. And to discuss the Brooklyn Nets and their new day, as it were, their new direction forward, I am joined by the host of the newest podcast in the NBA Locked On Network family, the Locked On Nets podcast, David Vertseberger. David, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you on, David, and we're going to be looking at this team because so much has changed with Brooklyn over the last couple of seasons, but in particular this offseason they brought in a ton of new guys. They tried a few new things. Some of them worked. We don't know. Some of them didn't work. We don't know how it's all going to pan out. But in terms of hope as a Brooklyn fan, do you think that things are starting to look a little bit brighter? Obviously, it won't come to fruition for a couple of years, but are things starting to look a bit better?
I'd say this is about as excited as a Nets fan, could be in the past few years. They've made the playoffs in the past, but it really feels like this team has a sense of actual direction, and they're definitely rebuilding in the right place. Not rebuilding just to try and make it into the playoffs every year. Sell those tickets. It really seems like they're trying to build not only a team that can compete for a championship down the line, but one that has a culture that you can continually go through ups and downs and still be competitive and still have things to look forward to. So I think Nets fans should be excited. Sean Marks, the new GM, really knows what he's doing.
Let's talk about a new culture, and you talk about Marks coming in, but the guy that I think a lot of people want to know about from a fantasy point of view is Kenny Atkinson. What do we know about him so far, and how can we sort of translate that into what we might see from the Nets on court this season?
Well, with Atkinson, we know he's a player development guy, so you're going to see a lot of young guys really flourish under him, and the Nets do have a lot of young guys. He's coming from Atlanta. They played a high-paced system, spread pick and roll, really modern NBA offense. And so you combine those two things, and the Nets might put up some of the biggest numbers in the league as far as fantasy-wise as certain individual guys, because the team's going to run, the team's going to shoot a lot of threes. This is a big conjecture because we don't know exactly what he's doing yet, but based on the teams he's worked closely with and what we know about him, this looks like what Brooklyn's going to do. Going to run a lot, going to have a lot of young guys, and young guys are usually out there trying to pad their stats. So I think that's what we can expect from Atkinson.
We've seen him in the past, as you mentioned, with Atlanta, and he worked closely with Jeremy Lin previously as well. The young thing is key, the player development, and there is a number of young players on this team who will be looking to take a step forward. But we'll go back to Lin first. He moves across to a situation now which is significant for him. I think the Nets got him on a really value deal, to be honest. He could have made more than that. I feel like he should have made more than that. He's always been, to me, a guy that, after the New York stuff happened, he's been undervalued and he's been put into roles where he hasn't been given an opportunity to flourish. In Houston, he had to play alongside James Harden and behind Patrick Beverley, and we know that James Harden has the ball in his hand for the majority of the time. In Los Angeles, yes, he went and started for a bit, but when you're playing next to Kobe Bryant, we know the ball is not in your hands and you're not running things. You move to Charlotte, he's a backup 1, backup 2 behind Kemba Walker. Again, the ball's in his hands somewhat, but he's got to share it with Kemba, he's got to share it with Nick Batum. He heads to Brooklyn. Who's he sharing the ball with?
Hey, listen, Bojan Bogdanovic is going to demand a lot of possessions, man. Let me tell you now. It's funny because the actual first ever episode of Locked On Nets, we talked about just this thing. I had a guest on, and he's a big Lin believer, and he was saying how Lin, throughout his career since Linsanity took off, has been in positions that are less than beneficial for him. Yep. So now he's with the Nets, and he's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. I mean, the Nets don't even have a third point guard. That's what's even crazier about the situation. he's really going to be running this team. And so not only is he going to have the ball in his hands a lot, he's the second scoring option, and third is such a far gap down that he's going to have to put up a lot of shots. And he's one of the only shot creators on that team. I mentioned in a previous podcast how late shot clock, clutch situations, it normally doesn't go into big men. So if we take Brook Lopez out of the picture for a second, who's going to take that shot? It's got to be Jeremy Lin. When you look at the rest of the roster, no one else could really do it. So this situation is going to be good for him. I don't expect like huge things from him, like Linsanity repeat, but I do expect him to put up big numbers just out of situation alone.
Yeah, no, we've got him projected relatively aggressively with his numbers this season, and some people will look at it and go, "Come on, that's crazy," but he has to handle the ball. We saw Jarrett Jack rack up a number of assists, and people say he can't get assists because he's playing with nobody. Well, who was Jarrett Jack playing with last season that he was passing the ball to get assists? Like, assists will come if you've got the ball in your hand. We've got him projected for 16 and 7, and I don't think that's crazy because, again,
I think that might be low.
Exactly. And you can get him, Jeremy Lin, in the 90s in drafts, and he is comfortably got top 50 potential. We've got him just outside the top 50, but you get him in that 60 to 70 range, I reckon you're going to be laughing because he could, and you said that's low, he could go 18 and 8, and I wouldn't go, that's weird, because that's exactly, look, someone has to score. He's going to have the ball nearly the whole time. Like, yeah, Boyan will shoot. Doesn't dribble. He doesn't dribble, though. He can't pass. He can't do any of that. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, we're not, and I'm going to talk about him later, we can't rely upon Rondae Hollis-Jefferson to score or to shoot or to do any of that stuff because he can't at this point in his career. Lin has to be the guy. There's, Karis LeVert can handle the ball, but we don't know what we're going to see from him just yet. I'm all aboard Lin. People might say that I'm crazy with his projections, but as you said, that might be under. So you should be looking to get Jeremy Lin on as many fantasy teams as you can. Again, we're not expecting a 2-week run that he had when he was playing for the Knicks. We're not expecting those numbers, but I would be mildly stunned if this is not the best total season of his career.
Now I'll jump in real fast because I do agree with you. I don't know much about fantasy, but I do know is if you want numbers, Jeremy Lin's going to be a good get for you. But here's the thing about Lin. What Nets fans should be worried about when it comes to him is he going to score efficiently? Is he going to defend at a high level? And can his production even lead to wins? Because as good as Jeremy Lin might be this season, he's not a guy that you could throw on a team and say, hey, lead us to the playoffs, right?
Yep.
But none of those things really impact the fantasy player. He's going to put up big numbers. It's really hard to imagine a scenario where he doesn't.
Well, those things, they can affect fantasy in that the fact that if a guy's not producing winning basketball, then the coach might be less hesitant to play him or get his backup in, but that's not a situation in Brooklyn. There's just nobody. There's no young guy coming through that they're going to go, oh, look, let's get Grievous Vasquez in there instead. Let's play Randy Foye instead. These are not other options that Kenny Atkinson's going to go, okay, let's time to build for the future. Let's get the General Grievous in there and let him try and do stuff. Like that's just not how it goes. You've got to look at opportunity and how the opportunity might present itself, and the opportunity is just there. Even if things don't go completely according to plan, he's just not going to be moved out of the starting lineup or into a reserve role unless something really weird happens during this season, which is always a possibility, but we're not expecting it at this point. The other thing with this starting lineup, David, is that we're not sure about is the starting power forward position. They had Thad Young. They traded him for pick 20, which became LeVert. Trevor Booker was brought in on a relatively voluminous deal, I think, for a player of Booker's caliber. They signed Luis Scola. They have their first-round draft choice from last season, Chris McCullough, in the mix as well. They signed Anthony Bennett. What do you see happening with this power forward rotation?
Well, I think Trevor Booker is going to start. I think he's probably the third best player on this roster, believe it or not. And he had a good season off the bench for the Jazz last year and the year before. And Atkinson's really going to let him try some new things, shoot the ball for one. He showed signs of being a good three-point shooter in past years. Now he's going to really get to try and make that happen. And he's going to play a lot of center, I hear. So that's going to help in the rebounding department and going to get him out there more. I'd say he's the starting power forward. I'm pretty confident in that. Here's where it gets interesting because Chris McCullough, we saw very little of him last season.
Yep.
And just as a prospect in general, there's not a whole lot we know about him. He has this athleticism and this body that makes you think, God, could he do this? Could he do that? But it's just we need to actually see him out there, and it's really hard to project how he'll do. So I think Luis Scola will probably be the backup for now. Maybe for the first few games until we see what McCullough can do out there. But I hope McCullough jumps ahead of him in the depth chart, just because Skull is a good veteran. He can score a little bit, can still rebound, pass, but he's the type of guy that fits better on a playoff team, on a contending team, to give you that spot minutes, right?
Yep.
The Nets' wins isn't going to fluctuate a whole lot depending on Luis Scola's playing time. So why not give it to McCullough? Let him go out there, get game experience, see what he can do for you, see what he might become.
I'm with you on McCullough, and I've said this for about the last 3 months or so, is that by January, I wouldn't be shocked if McCullough is starting. Now, he might not be, but if they look at him and go, cool, well, this is actually a player that can be useful in our future. Skoll is 40 years old. Like, he's not going to be useful in our future. Trevor Booker is what he is, and if he's on a playoff team, he's a third or maybe even a fourth big man. He's not a future starter on a good team. McCullough could be. He's long. He's athletic. He put up a ridiculous sort of steal rate last season. He blocked a lot of shots. He showed that he's not scared to take threes. And all those things, they look really good from a fantasy point of view. A guy that can get blocks, steals, and threes, score a bit, get some rebounds. Look, all that stuff is really enticing. Now, for now, we're definitely not looking at him in standard league situation. But if they said, you know what, we're going with McCullough, we're going to start him when we head into January or after the All-Star break, he's playing 30 minutes a night, I'm all over him, because then he's going to put up a block a game, probably over a steal a game, maybe 0.7, maybe a 3 a game, 7 rebounds, 12, 13 points. All that stuff is really valuable. And we talk about developing the young players. He is the young player at that position. There's no one else at that spot that they're going to want to develop. And remember, we've only seen him for 20-odd games after recovering from an ACL. It takes guys a long time to come back from an ACL back to what they actually are as a player. So when we head to January, that's going to be, we're talking a year and a half, 18 months removed from his ACL injury. He should be looking back to being at full health, and I think we'll see a bit more from him. Do you think there is a chance that he starts at some point this season?
That's tough. I think I'm higher on Booker than you are. I think he's a pretty good player. McCullough would have to, or maybe I'm lower on McCullough. I'm not sure. McCullough would have to really show us something. I mean, he'd have to come off the bench and do some really good things. And even then, you have to wonder if he starts over Booker, because you don't want to rush rookie, especially big men. You don't want to rush them into situations maybe they can't handle. And especially him coming off the ACL tear. I'm not calling him injury prone or anything, but maybe you want to take it easy. But yeah, I don't know. I suppose it wouldn't shock me, but this is not exactly what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I guess that's the way that I look at it. It wouldn't be shocking to me to see it happen. It probably won't, but if we're looking to build youth, that is the youth. And maybe it moves from him being the third power forward to being the second power forward ahead of Scholar, and getting, instead of 12 minutes, he plays 19 minutes or something like that. As for Booker, he's a borderline top 50 or top 150 guy. He's sort of right there. I don't imagine he's going out and playing 32 minutes a night or anything like that. He's going to be a mid to high 20s player. It's going to be useful for 14, 16 team leagues. That's really about it. But you're going to get good rebounding. He hits a 3 occasionally. He's not terrible with blocks and steals. He's got a good field goal percentage. He's solid, but there's nothing spectacular happening from Booker. So just look at him in deeper leagues. Unless something changes and they do just to run him 33 minutes a night, then you might consider him in a standard format. But we remember last year when he replaced Rudy Gobert and Derek Favors at times, he was okay, but he was never great enough to be a consistent top 100 threat for fantasy. So he's going to be in a similar role this year. Don't be looking at him to all of a sudden change completely. But the talent level on Utah and Brooklyn is a lot different. So maybe he does get some more shots. Maybe he scores a little bit more. All that stuff is definitely possible. Let's move on to the draft. The Nets didn't have a first-round pick, but they did acquire one in the Thaddeus Young deal, and they picked Karis LeVert at pick 20, the guard from Michigan, who unfortunately, David, for all Brooklyn fans, is dealing with a broken foot, and which he's had multiple times, which Brooklyn fans are well aware of how to cope with a player having multiple foot fractures. Levert is still not ready to go, but what do you make of the draft pick, and when do you expect us to see him this season?
Well, he's tricky. Well, I'm not really sure when we're gonna see him. It's not gonna be right away. Obviously, the Nets have made that clear. He's working his way back from that foot, and even then, he's gonna have to get back into game speed and things like that. And the Nets aren't really in a huge rush, especially with him, because they have a lot of shooting guard prospects, a lot of wing prospects that basically fit his position. So they might try them out first. Levert, it's sort of a high risk, high reward pick. A lot of teams were turned off by the injuries, and even then, just skill wise, a lot. Some analysts are pretty iffy about him. So I think this guy's going to be one Nets fans have to be patient about. I don't think we're going to learn much about him for a while. And even if he comes back and plays, maybe earns his spot in the rotation late this season, by then you only get about a month or two of real good minutes watching him, and that's not really enough to draw concrete conclusions. So that's what I make of him. Give him a lot of time. Focus on other guys right now.
He had the broken foot, but the thing that encourages me, I guess, with that is the fact that the surgery was performed by the Nets doctor who did the operation on Brook Lopez, which, touch wood, has been fine for the last 2 years. So
oh yeah,
you hope that's a good sign that the Nets doctor did the surgery. The Nets drafted him. They've spoken to the doctor and gone, Doc, like what's the story? Like where are we at with this? And the doctor's given him 3 thumbs up and gone, cool, we're right to go. I've done it with Brook. I've done it with Karras now. He's going to be good. Now, it's going to take a bit of time, but what he is, David, he's a 6'7" guard that handles the ball. So he can play the 1 for a little bits of time, but he plays the 2. He's really athletic. His assist rate was really high in college, and I'm getting to this because in fantasy, his numbers translate sensationally well. He could be a guy that scores, but also gets you 4 or 5 assists a game and 4 or 5 rebounds and gets a steal and hits threes and does it all really efficiently. He was a 40% three-point shooter at Michigan as well. All that stuff is tantalizing as a prospect, but health is going to be a concern. So for keeper leagues and dynasty leagues, deeper sort of situations, I think he's a really valuable prospect because shooting guards who can act as point guards and get you assists, and there might be a season in his career where he gets 5 or 6 assists if he's into a main playmaking role. He can do that sort of stuff. He did that at Michigan. Plus the shooting, plus some of the defense that he can provide as well, plus the efficiency with his percentages. It's all really good, but we're not going to see much of it this season. That's the concern, and we might not ever see it, and that's obviously the bigger concern, that he just might not ever be able to get healthy. But you talk about risk rewarded, it's definitely there. That was sort of the mantra of the Nets off season. Let's just go big on guys, Levert, the offer sheets to Tyler Johnson and Alan Crabb, and let's see how it works out. They've got Levert, let's see how it goes, but to me, he does have significant fantasy upside, but there's obviously a huge risk associated with it just because we don't know when or if he's going to see the court. Now, their second round pick, local boy Isaiah Whitehead with pick 42. What can you tell us about Whitehead?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
I can repeat the question. I said, what can you tell us about Isaiah Whitehead?
Apologies, the internet fizzled out there. He had a strong late sort of second half of the college season. It's a real question whether his skills can translate. Second round pick though, that's a good place to get him. He's either a flat out scorer in the NBA or he's not. Really, I think I can't talk from a fantasy standpoint quite yet, but I think from a basketball standpoint, Nets fans should be watching for just flashes of can he step up and score at this level. Even if it only happens 1 every 3 games, 1 every 4 games, seeing that it can happen should give Nets fans reassurance. And then once he develops a little more, he could be a really good role player. As far as getting minutes early, it's tough. Again, the Nets have a lot of prospects at his position, just tons of shooting guards that are young and that are all fighting for minutes, that are trying to show that they can be part of this future. So him cracking the rotation is going to be tough. It's just a logjam there.
He's a guy that you probably consider as somewhat of a chucker. He goes out and scores and shoots, and that's what he does. And it's going to come at a significant cost this season if for some reason you are adding him in a fantasy situation, because he's going to shoot a poor percentage. But you talk about the guys ahead of him, I don't really envisage him seeing the court all that much. this season. He might see it somewhat, but I just find it hard at this point to think that he's going to go out there and put up significant numbers or get significant playing time. He might not ever work out in the NBA just because of the way that his game goes. He's not a great distributor, he's not a great defender, but he's a scorer, and that has a role in certain situations. But he's got to be able to move that into the right spot, I guess, in a fantasy setting or in an NBA setting, really. Now, the Nets, David, brought in a stack of free agents this offseason. We've talked about Jeremy Lin and Trevor Booker already. Luis Scola, who's a guy that decided he was going to start hitting threes last season and did it at 40%. We assume that he'll continue to do that. But in terms of overall role, it's going to be hard for him to see meaningful enough playing time for him to be useful. Randy Foye, again, I think that Randy Foye is pretty far down the rotation order. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think he'd be your best fantasy bet, and even from a basketball perspective, I see him as just sort of that veteran guy. He's gonna come in on the court and do one thing. The one thing he's good at, basically right now at this point in his career, is shooting. Even though he had a bad 3-point shooting season last year, it was weird. I don't know. I expect that to bounce back a little bit. That seemed like an anomaly. The guy could shoot the lights out. And I'm hoping he sort of mentors. He's also a shooting guard, so I'm hoping he sort of mentors all these young guys. He's been around the league for quite a while, so I don't expect a lot of big things from him on the basketball court. He'll come in, he'll shoot his threes, and hopefully he'll be a good influence on these young guys that are playing the same position as him.
Grievous Vasquez comes in and should be the backup point guard to start the season. I imagine there'll be some situations where him and Lin play together, but he had a real issue last season with that ankle problem, kept him out all of the season. And from my understanding, he's not fully healthy from that situation yet. So he had a broken ankle, he had surgery on it. So that's a concern. I don't have any issues with Vasquez taking starting job away from Lin at this point, but I do think they share the court a little bit. And he is a guy that's shown that he can play off the ball. He did that with Kyle Lowry in Toronto, where he can hit some threes and he can get some assists. So that's going to be a useful sort of streaming option and a deeper league sort of player. But can you see him being that he'll be that backup point guard and play a bit alongside Lin as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's really what he's good at, is being able to jumble those two positions and basically supply the same things to both. He can go out there, he can create a little bit, he can shoot. I think he's going to be helpful to the Nets, but again, he's one of those guys like Scola. You look at him as like, all right, so he's a decent veteran that could play good minutes and sort of just be a positive player on the court. Yep. So that should help winning, right? But no, the Nets are going to be around 20 wins, so it doesn't really matter in the whole season. It's one of those. So I expect good things out of him. Hopefully the ankle doesn't bother him too much. He might get off to a slow start, but he should come around and just give good minutes at both the 1 and 2.
One guy I am pretty interested in that the Nets did sign, and that's Justin Hamilton, who played last season over in Europe. In the 2014-15 season, he played the end of the season in Minnesota. Many of you may not be aware or remember that, but he was really, really, really good in that stretch before he suffered a concussion, which ended his season. Now, he comes in as the backup center for the Nets. He does a lot of good things. He showed some shot blocking prowess in Minnesota. He shoots, he can hit the three, he rebounds, he's very Brook Lopez-like in terms of his ability to be efficient from the field and from the line. And I think the Nets got themselves a significant steal with getting Justin Hamilton in that backup role. And if for some reason Brook Lopez either has to miss time with injury or they decide to shut him down early as they did last season and Hamilton gets put in, then he'd be someone that you add in every single fantasy league because he does have top 75 statistical upside if he gets those 27 to 30 minutes. I really like the signing of Hamilton. David, what did you think of it?
I think it's a smart move. You're always looking for these diamonds in the rough, and he could definitely be one. He's shown he hasn't had a ton of NBA experience, but when he's been in the league, he's shown some good signs. I think right now he's the 5th big in this Nets rotation, though. You look at Lopez, Booker, Scola, McCullough. I think those 4 will have the big chunk of the minutes, and maybe Hamilton coming in there if there's an injury or a guy's tired, whatever the case. It sounds like the Nets are going to be doing a lot of Booker and Scola at the 5, so yep. I'm not even sure I'd call Hamilton the backup 5 right now. I'd like to see him get some minutes, though. He's a guy that has basketball skills, and I think he could prove his worth if he gets out there a bit. But again, with the state of the Nets roster right now and not seeing any games yet, I wouldn't put my money on him cracking the rotation right away or substantially, really.
What about Anthony Bennett? We know his story. Number one draft pick, been on 3 teams now. This has clearly got to be his last chance. Atkinson has spoken about wanting to use him at centre some as well. We see that whenever he goes and plays for Team Canada, he looks decent. He looks, I wouldn't say good, but he looks not bad. He looks not terrible. But that's never shown up in the NBA. Now, if there's a team that he's going to play for that's going to give him an opportunity to actually show that he can play, this could be the team. What do you make as a Nets, someone covering the Nets? Bennett's on the team. Do you have a sliver of hope? Do you have zero hope? You just go, not this guy. Like, what do you think?
Well, the last episode of Locked On Nets, I ranked every member of the Nets roster with a guaranteed contract, 15-1, in how I expected them to do this season. And Anthony Bennett was 15th.
Really?
He was worse than Joe Harris.
That's what I was going to throw out there. Worse than Joe Harris. That's a low bar.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't actually know that Atkinson was planning on playing him really at all. So I don't know. I can't see it. This is like the 3rd or 4th team that said, oh, well, maybe if he does this, if we play him here, can we just? It's never worked out for him, and I don't know. It's one of those things I don't have hope for. It'd be nice. I'm all for it. Please, I wish the kid all the best in the world. I don't see it right now because we haven't seen it at the NBA level ever.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't seen anything from him, but again, there's an opportunity for something to click. Maybe he's just a name to watch, really. Now, you mentioned Joe Harris. I can't believe Joe Harris is back on an NBA roster, to be honest. Give me a positive on Joe Harris.
Maybe he can give me. I have a train of thought here. I'm just laughing at the question. He can, he was on the Cavs. He can come in there you can come into the Nets locker room and say, "Hey, here's how the Cavs won the title." Or I don't know, something like that.
Except that he got waived by the Magic before that happened. He was traded and waived by
those are just listen. You and your facts and your details. We don't need to bring that stuff up.
Fair enough. He played 5 games last season for a total of 15 minutes. He scored 3 total points in those 15 minutes, shooting 1 of 4. So we don't have a huge look. He did suffer a broken foot, so it's not that he was just totally crap that he didn't play. But yeah, I'm stunned that he is actually on a roster at this point, and we'll see. Maybe he proves me wrong, but
it's not like the Nets were short on shooting guards either.
No, exactly. And
they just went ahead and got him.
There's the other guys they could have given that spot to Bo Beach. They could give it to Yogi Ferrell, and they might still do that. But the fact that Harris is there is a little bit of a weird one to me. So they brought in a whole bunch of new guys there. But let's talk about breakout candidates. Who's a guy on this team that you're looking at to be a breakout player this season?
Breakout player this season, man.
You can frame that however you want. You can whatever criteria you want to use for breakout, you can use.
I mean, is it cheating if I go with Jeremy Lin?
No, I don't think
so. I feel like this is going to be the most positive season he's had since the Knicks. Again, I'm not expecting him to even be he'll be an average starting point guard, maybe a little above that. But again, that's better than where he's been at the past few years. So I'd give him that. Maybe. I'm really curious about this guy, Sean Kilpatrick. He joined onto the Nets late last season from the D-League, and he was just a positive net player out there late in the season. He defended. He had all this energy and hustle, and it was great to see. He could also shoot a little bit, drive, finish at the rim. So I want to see if he can carry that over to a full season where he's not that random D-League guys teams didn't scout because they didn't really know anything about him. I'm not sure I would go out and predict he's the breakout player. I'm not quite sure if he's an NBA player yet. So I'll give it to Jeremy Lin. He's already talked about it. He's going to be in a perfect position for him, and that's going to help him play all around better.
Kilpatrick was a guy that after the All-Star break played 23 minutes a night last season. He averaged almost 14 points, and he did it at 46% shooting and 90% from the line, hitting 36% of his threes, which is all really useful. But he does nothing in the other areas. He won't get rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. He doesn't help in any of those areas. So he's a guy that I don't think he really ever tops out at being a player who plays more than 22 or 23 minutes, and he's a spark plug type of efficient scorer who gets to the rack like really well and scores at the rim really well. And if he keeps that 36% from 3 up, then that's obviously huge as well for this team as a scoring option off the bench. In terms of fantasy, yeah, look, a decent supply of points and threes and free throw percentage, but it's going to be restricted to deeper leagues because I just don't see him getting enough minutes to be considered useful enough in those standard size leagues. I want to get your take on a guy that a lot of people over at Basketball Monster have seen our projections and our rankings for guys, and if you listen to this podcast plenty of times, you know my thoughts on rankings, so don't get caught up in that. But Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, we didn't see a huge amount of him last season. He had that broken ankle, came back at the end of the season, but when he came back at the end of the year, it wasn't like that he was going full bore. He was playing games on, games off, minutes limits, all that sort of stuff. But there should be zero competition for his minutes and his role on this team as a starting 3. And I think he's one of the more exciting players on this team in terms of building for the future, David. What do we look at with Rondé for this upcoming season?
Well, he's their best prospect, right?
Yep.
And just as a rookie, I can't stop talking about it. His rookie season defense, it was so good for a rookie. People were talking about Justice Winslow a bit. Hollis-Jefferson was right up there with him, and he'd make these rookie mistakes that everyone does when they first get in the league, gambling, a little out of position, trying to help where he shouldn't have. But his sheer athleticism and length, he could get back in position so quickly. It was just freakish how he did it. And so I'm really looking forward to this season, seeing if he cuts down on those rookie mistakes defensively. And for fantasy players, if you want steals and blocks, just pick him up. Maybe later in your draft. Again, I'm not a fantasy expert, but steals and blocks, he'll be good for that. Rebounds too, actually. I think for a small forward, he'll be pretty good there. And offensively, I was less impressed last season.
That makes sense.
Yeah, he's a Michael Kidd-Gilchrist type offensively. He's last year he really spent most of his time on offense, scoring on cuts, on some offensive rebounds. His mid-range shot wasn't as bad as I expected it to be, but hoping to see some improvement on the jump shooting. It's really hard to sort of project that. For some guys they can do it. Kawhi did it. For some guys they can't. But he can still go out there and score points in different ways. And I think he's going to be a really good player for this Nets team.
Now, people will come in and they look at people are obsessed by rankings, David, as you would know, and they look at Rondé and they see that he comes in ranked 63rd, and they go, it's stupid. And I'll say, cool, you never pick him at pick 63. That's just not what you do. But his overall value and things you touched on is there. So this is what we've got him projected at for this season, and let me know if you think that I'm being outlandish with any of this stuff. 9 points. Yep, I don't think that's crazy. 8 rebounds. 2 steals, 0.7 blocks. I don't think that those numbers are too crazy for a guy that should be getting over 30 minutes a night. Do you think that's fair enough?
I mean, that sounds about right. The points might even be a little low. I could see him scoring in double digits even, just on the sort of hustle points, the way he'll just go after offensive rebounds, claw them away from guys and score on cuts, and especially on the fast break. I mean, the guy can run and jump like crazy, and this team's going to be running, and they're going to have Jeremy Lin at the helm pushing the fast break. So, yeah, I think those numbers are about right. I think you've got it pretty much on the mark there.
And those numbers, like that value of all those categories, puts him ranked 63rd. Now, you can draft him with your last pick, with your pick just outside 100, something like that, and you know that getting 8 rebounds from a small forward is not easy to do. 2 steals, 0.7 blocks, not a good shooter, we know that, but he'll still give you 46% field goal percentage because he finishes athletically in transition. He can get dunks and layups that way. And field goal percentage doesn't correlate to shooting. It correlates to how you're putting in the ball, how often you're putting the ball in the basket, whether that is a dunk, whether that's a 2-foot layup, whatever it is. It doesn't mean that you're knocking down 20-foot elbow jumpers. It's just not. That's not what it means. So, yeah, he's same as Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. They're not great shooters, but they still put it in at 46, 47%, and that can help. His free throw percentage is okay. It's not befitting of a guy that's terrible. In the last month of the season, his last 10 games after he came back from the injury, he hit 77% of his free throws. That's a pretty good rate. He hit 33% of his threes. these are good numbers. You know, he's not in summer league. He struggled with offense because he was forced to be one of the main guys on that team. But he still shot 46%, only 25% from three, but still 46%, and went 85% from the line. He also, in 26 minutes, got 3.2 steals. So the steals are going to come. He is a guy that you should absolutely be all over in the last round of drafts, especially you're in a situation where you're punting assists, and that can mean steals can be hard to come by. Getting Hollis Jefferson basically solves that issue for you, because you're getting a guy who can get you 2 steals, maybe more, and there's 5, 6, maybe 10 of those guys in the league that can actually get to that number, and he is one of them. Yes, the points are a problem, but you're more optimistic on the points than me. Maybe he gets to 12 points, and then you're talking 12 and 8 with 2 steals. That's really, really good numbers. So don't look at Hollis Jefferson and go 63, Josh, you've lost your mind. Look at the numbers and tell me where it's wrong, because it all makes sense to me, and the relative value of getting 2 steals bumps someone up significantly high. So that's my rant on Hollis Jefferson. I think he's going to be really good. Look, he's going to be a player, David, that I think that we see in the conversation, probably not this season, but moving forward as an all NBA defensive team player, throughout the course of his career, just a guy that's always in there, being that player that just takes the opposition's number one perimeter guy and shuts them down. Yeah,
I could absolutely see that.
Is there anyone else? Oh, let's talk Brook Lopez, because he cops a lot of hate. I think maybe it's not hate. Maybe he just isn't as appreciated as what he should be. He's one of the top 2 or 3 offensive centers in the NBA. He's not a great rebounder, we know that, but his rebounding numbers have increased significantly over the last 2 seasons. He's a much better defender than people give him credit for. He's a good shot blocker. He's really efficient. He's a solid passer. And we keep hearing the whispers, David, that he is going to start taking threes. Is this the season, do you reckon he does step out and start hitting some?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that, and he really is underappreciated. Injuries have sort of hurt him. Playing for the Nets has really hurt him. You're talking about a guy that, no matter what he was doing wrong early in his career, he would just build on it every single time, right? So people were complaining about the defense. He got better on defense. People were complaining about the rebounding numbers. He's rebounding fine, and when he doesn't grab a rebound, he's boxing out.
Yeah, he helps the other guys rebound.
Absolutely, and people were talking about the passing. You would throw it in, as soon as like maybe 2015, you would throw the ball to him in the post. He'd get doubled and just wouldn't pass it. He would shoot it over 2 guys. Last season, suddenly his passing picked it up. His assist rate took a little jump. He was passing out of the double team. He had this great give and go chemistry with Shane Larkin. So naturally, Lopez, you're not a modern NBA center. You're posting up. Why don't you start shooting threes? Yeah, sure. He's going to add that to his game, because he's already hitting long twos, and now with Atkinson in the fold, I definitely expect him to shoot threes, and I think he'll be pretty decent at it too. Really, the only concern in any given Brook Lopez season is health.
Yep. And we've had two healthy seasons in a row from Brook, and I often refer to this, and look, it might end up being wrong, but after he had that last surgery, Zach Lowe had a podcast, and he said he'd spoken to the doctors for the Nets, and they said, this surgery, if it works, it works. He's done. There's no more problems. If it doesn't work, then he's finished. Well, it appears that it's worked. So I've got confidence that it actually is going to hold. It said it's been over 2 years now since he's had any issues with that foot or any fractures in that foot. It's held together. Yeah, he played 82 games his first 3 NBA seasons. The seasons in between where he had the foot issue, he played over 70 games in those seasons, and he's played 72 and 73 the last 2 years. So health concerns. When does an injury prone tag leave a guy? That's the question I have, because again, he's played 2 full, and he sat out last season, the end of the year, but he wasn't injured. It was just like, we don't want you to get injured. Same with Thad Young. Like, people don't go, Thad Young's injury prone because he sat out the last 2 weeks of the season. But because it's Brook Lopez, he's injury prone. Like, I don't think he missed a single game until the Nets started, shut him down at the end of the season, did he?
Well, here's the thing. Lopez has always had these foot problems, and when it comes to feet and bigs, it's a worry. Yeah. Big red flag. Yeah, and I think the injury prone label is weird. It makes it sound like it's the guy's fault. It's like,
don't get me started on it. I can't stand it.
You're injury prone, man. Why do you keep going out and getting injured? Like he keeps driving his car into a wall every other season and is out.
Brooke, you're soft. Your foot broke. You're so soft. Cool. Drink more milk. Like, what's he supposed to do?
Drink more milk, exactly. Yeah, it's weird. But I think he definitely had injury concerns, and they were legitimate. But these past 2 seasons, like you said, he's been healthy. And I didn't actually listen to that Zach Lowe podcast, but if that's true, then I believe it.
This was about 2 years ago. He had that podcast, and I was like, okay, cool. So let's just see how Brooke works out. But he said that if it because it was a different type of graft surgery, and they said if it works out, then it's good as new. And that's why I have confidence in Levert as well, because it's the same doctor who's gone in and said, we know what just worked with Brooke. Let's just try this with Karras as well. So that's why I have some confidence there. But that podcast was 2 years ago, maybe. I'll need to try and dig it up and find it. But it was something where I said, and I've always had it burnt into my head and watched Brooke. And the fact that he hasn't had issues for 2 years makes me think, cool, we're tentatively good to go now for the future. But he's awesome as a player. Look, he was a 21.8 rebound, almost 2 blocks, 0.8 steals, 51 and 79. These are numbers that are top 25 fantasy numbers. You don't have to draft him in the top 2 rounds because injury prone, again, it's a label that sticks. People are really concerned about it. So he's going to fall to the 3rd round, and you should love getting him in the 3rd round. There aren't many bigs who can go 50 and 80 from the field and from the line and can score 20 points. And then if he starts hitting threes as well, that's just another part to what he can do. In ESPN, he's getting drafted on average at pick 37. It's really, really low. You get him at pick 37, You're getting 10, 12, 15 spots of value out of him.
And you got to realize, too, that Joe Johnson's not on this team anymore. Yep. Deron Williams not on his team anymore. He's the number one option, undoubtedly.
Look, he could score 24 points a game, and I wouldn't be shocked.
No, not at all.
He's that good off. You can watch some of Brook Lopez, and I remember the last season that Darren Williams was there. They ran this pick and pop game and pick and roll stuff at the end of the season that was pretty much unstoppable. Brook just wouldn't miss in that sort of situation. He always got himself into the right position. He is. I talk about the best offensive centers. There's not many that actually just offensively. Like Boogie's pretty good. He's really good. Is Brook a better offensive center than Anthony Davis? Probably. Yeah, just purely offensively. Like there's not many guys that are better than him in that position.
And then just general players that post up, really, he's probably right there, top 5s. Maybe around that number.
Absolutely, and you're on a team that's going to be relying on him. And yes, he's going to be copying some double teams, but he's that good that he can deal with that sort of stuff, and he's going to be putting up numbers at high efficiency. He gets the line a pretty decent amount as well. We're looking at 5 to 6 attempts a game at almost 80%. They're really good numbers. Plus the fact that there's an opportunity for him to block 2 shots a game. There's really good numbers that can come from Brook Lopez. So again, I'm all aboard him. He falls around because of that injury concern, which again hasn't been an issue for 2 seasons, but could always crop back up. Don't get me wrong. But you can get that value, and I love him. There's not many guys in that spot who give you 20 points plus 50%, plus 80% from the line. Those guys just don't exist unless their name is LaMarcus Aldridge. They're the only 2 guys in that early rounds that can really do that for you. And once they're gone, then you have to really start looking at, okay, I need to get a big. Is he going to hurt my field goal percentage like a Kevin Love? Is he going to hurt my free throw percentage like Andre Drummond? Like which way am I going to go? There's not many that are going to give you both positive numbers in that category, and that's why I think Brook Lopez is so valuable, especially in a rotisserie format when you never want to hurt your percentages, and he just gives you that big bump and allows some insulation for perhaps some other guys later on. So I do really like him in that sense. I think we've covered this team. The other guys, Yogi Ferrell, Bo Beach, another player who I don't want to mention his name because I think I'm going to get it wrong. Let's try it. Egidijus Mokevicius. That's terrible.
Josh, I'm covering the team and I can't pronounce his name.
His surname's Mokevicius. Okay, Mokevicius. I can do that. That first name, I'm just going to call him Ed. I don't know how to say that.
Oh no,
first name.
he's his nickname's Iggy.
Iggy, cool. Iggy Mokevicius. I can do that. These guys, they don't have much of a chance of making the team, but Joe Harris is not inexpendable. They could find themselves on the team, and out of those 3 guys, is there anyone you look at and go, I wouldn't mind seeing them get some playing time?
I'm not too familiar with those guys, but talking to some experts, it seems like they're going to end up on the Long Island Nets, their D-League team.
Yep.
Again, I mean, Joe Harris, the Nets could lose him. Anthony Bennett at some point too. So I would be on the lookout for these guys maybe mid-season. The Nets are a team that are looking for diamonds in the rough, and they want to find guys at great value that are young that could be surprise great players. So throughout the season, forget the fantasy drafts right now. Throughout the season, the Nets are going to be shuffling in D-League guys, guys from their D-League team, maybe some overseas players, who knows, just to try and throw a waiver at these guys and say, hey, maybe you could do something. Maybe we found something here. So I don't think we're going to be seeing these guys early on, but they could come back to this team.
Yeah, definitely. There's interesting to see how they look. Bo Beach was quite impressive at Summer League at times with his shooting, so he's going to be an interesting player for them to take a look at when we get to that situation where late season call ups start to occur. Okay, what's your bold prediction for this team, David?
My bold prediction.
Yep.
About a week ago, I was telling everyone, listen, the Nets aren't going to be as bad as you think. Let me tell you. And then after doing about a week's worth of Nets analysis, I'm starting to not really have a way to justify that take. Yeah. So I don't know. Bold prediction.
Okay, do they win more or less than 20 games?
Oh, man. More or less than 20 games? I'll go more.
Okay.
I'll go more. Low 20s, maybe mid 20s. Okay. I think they could have a really good offense.
Yeah, look, Lopez and Lin pick and rolls are going to be not easy to stop for the opposition. I'll put it that way.
No, and I think if Trevor Booker can shoot decently from deep, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson is just going to be causing havoc. And Bojan can shoot. They have a number of shooting guards that could step in there and hit that open shot. Let me see. I'll go with my bold prediction. They'll have a top. Like if I say top 20 offense, that's not even that impressive. So I don't know if it counts as bold.
I think it's impressive for people the way that people might think about this team.
Yeah, I don't know. It's rough with the Nets because like when you think of bold prediction, you think of positive.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's not going to be a whole lot going on with this team.
Just not terrible.
Yeah, I think they're going to be less completely awful than people think. That's my bold prediction for you, Josh.
Okay, I'm happy with that. But you know what? There's one player that we didn't talk about, which I did forget about, and that's Bojan Bogdanovic, who's likely going to be the starter on the wing next to Hollis Jefferson. What can we expect from Bojan? He had a pretty decent Olympics, but we've seen him go out and score 44 points in a game. We've seen him go out and be invisible for big stretches of the season last season. He's a shooter. He's a scorer who provides very little defense and very little of anything else. How do you see him fitting in with this team?
Well, I think we know what he is, and he's. I like to think of him as a poor man's 3-and-D guy because some games he could just brick everything from downtown, and if you throw as a defender, I think he can be a positive defender, but the problem is when you throw him on like really good perimeter guys, then he struggles. He's just an okay role player, and on this Nets team, he's starter worthy, which you can't really say for a lot of the other teams in the league. But he's going to come in, he's going to hit some threes. I really don't expect any kind of big fluctuation in his production. I think his shooting is going to go slightly up, and maybe his points up as well, just out of higher pace, more spacing, things like that. But yeah, he's just sort of. He's only been in the league for 2 years, but he is 27.
Yeah.
So it's not like he has this room to sort of, I didn't know about this part in his game. Wow, he's really stepping up here. I don't expect that out of him. And he's just not. He doesn't really fill the stat sheet a whole lot. He'll get in for the occasional defensive rebound, and he can pass a bit. He's just not someone that really demands defenders so that he can find an open man. Usually got teams to let him go one-on-one, so there's no pass to be made there.
The Nets also signed Chase Budinger recently. Any chance of him making the roster, you think?
Yeah, I think so. He's a good shooter. He's been sort of a journeyman, but he's still a good basketball player. I'm not sure what kind of real importance. I don't think this team is going to really go out of its way to get him onto the roster and into the rotation because he's not that young anymore. and he's another wing on top of all these prospects. They want to see if they can turn into something. So I don't expect much out of him either, but it's good to see him join onto a training camp deal. See if he can still make a run at having a strong NBA career.
Yeah, definitely. He was a guy that I did like at times, but knee problems have really bothered him throughout his career. I think that's it for today's podcast, David. Anything else you want to add regarding this team that you're covering?
Listen to the Locked On Nets podcast. I'm going to plug myself. I hope you don't mind, Josh.
I was going to ask you to plug it anyway, so go ahead.
Locked On Nets, Monday to Friday, like every Locked On podcast, Monday to Friday. Your daily dose of Brooklyn Nets news, analysis, interviews. I'm David. I host the show. You can follow me on Twitter @_Verts. That's _VERTS. I think that's it. Go Nets. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
No problem, David. Now go and search up the Locked On Nets podcast. Subscribe to it on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on TuneIn, on anywhere where you find podcasts. Do the same for this one, the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. And you know what? Throw us both a 5-star review. That would help significantly. It helps in helping the shows grow, get out to a bigger audience, attracting advertisers, helping us get some money in to improve the quality of the show as well. And everyone who's done that so far for this show, it's been greatly appreciated. So if you've got a spare couple of minutes, throw David a 5-star, throw it this way as well. It does help out significantly, so thank you to everyone who's done that. Follow me on Twitter @redrock_bball. Check out Basketball Monster and follow our Twitter account there @BaskMonster for all the as it happens news when the season's going down. You can. I've created a playlist on Audio Boom for all of these season preview podcasts. So if you want to find them all in one spot, head to Audio Boom, or you can see the link on Twitter when I tweet them out. Go there, you'll see playlists with all the season preview podcasts as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, the sound issue is now fixed. You'll see some improved graphical stuff as well. So hopefully everything continues to go smoothly on that end. David, thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.